Hello everyone, Refresh here, and today I am here to talk about Rivals of Ixalan Prerelease. I went to a pre-release on Saturday this past weekend, and I got my Rivals of Ixalan Prerelease pack, and this is what I got inside. You get the standard deck box that's been around since Shadows over Innistrad. I think that's the same style. And inside you get one spin down counter in one of the 5 colors of magic. You get 6 packs, which I've already opened, as well as a little instructional / thematic message with tips on how to build the sealed deck. You get a card divider. I used it to divide my deck from all the other cards that I got. This was my pre-release promo card, the Protean Raider. It's a 3-mana clone, essentially, if you attack. Now, the deck that I ended up building is this one. So this is the deck that I built. As you can see, it's very heavy on the 3-drops, and it has a lot more 4-drops. There's not much in the way of 1 and 2-drops in the deck, and if you look carefully, it is highly evasive. I have 3 Exultant Sky Marchers, a Siren Reaver. On top of that, I have a Warkite Marauder here, and the Sky Marcher Aspirant actually can ascend to a flyer once you get the City's Blessing. So with that many flyers, I thought I'd just play white-blue flyers, mostly white with a little bit of blue for some tempo, and the Territorial Hammerskulls as well as the Warkite Marauder makes blocking hard for my opponent. The Forerunner of the Legion can grab any one of the Exultant Sky Marchers, or even the Sanguine Glorifier if I need to put a counter on one of these flyers to make them stronger to hit harder. Or I can also grab a Bishop of the Binding, which is a pseudo removal card in that when it enters the battlefield, it removes a creature from the battlefield, and then it can power up itself or another vampire when it attacks. So those are all pretty cool options for me. I almost put Cobbled Wings in the deck, but I felt like with as much flyers as I had, I thought it would be a little unnecessary. The Forerunner of the Legion also works well because whenever a vampire enters the battlefield, it adds +1/+1 to one of my attacking creatures, or to any of my creatures. So I can use it to power up and hit a little harder with my flyers. So despite the fact that most of the curve is in the 3 and the 4-drops, it's still very much an aggressive deck. I cut anything that was greater than 4 drops so that I can just plan to hit early and hit hard. Because I have so much evasion, the Dowsing Dagger actually worked well as just a 2/1 attacking equipment. I don't have to worry about the 0/2s that it creates because I'm just going to equip it to one of my flyers anyways. And then the Squire's Devotion works really well on a flyer as well because, I mean, yes, I can get 2 for 1 if it gets removed. I get a 1/1 white vampire anyways, and then when my flyers hit, I'm actually creating a really bad race situation for my opponent because it will give me life when they hit as well, in addition to hitting a little harder. Now there's a little bit of combat tricks here as well. The Moment of Truth and the Vampire Zeal works as both combat tricks and ways of squeezing the last 2 points of damage. And then the Sea Legs is a bit of a combat trick. The Depth of Desire and the 2 Deadeye Rig-Haulers work as tempo and possibly also a combat trick as well. And then the Divine Verdict is just straight removal. I don't have a lot of straight removal. It's the Divine Verdict and the Bishop of Binding. Otherwise, it's just try to be aggressive as possible. The Territorial Hammerskulls let me tap down my opponent's best blockers so I can just go in on the attack. And then I use the Deadeye Rig-Haulers and the Depths of Desire sort of to bounce their expensive spells to basically cause them to lose turns so that I can hopefully beat them down and finish them before the game is over. And so that is a deck that I built. Since it's mostly white, I ended up with 11 plains and 6 islands to go in the deck. The deck actually functioned really, really well. So in the first game, I was up against a Boros deck, and I started with a mulligan to 5, and she started with a mulligan to 6, and it was actually a bit close because she was also playing a pretty aggressive deck, but I sort of triumphed in part because she was a bit rusty, and she hadn't been playing since, I think, Shadows over Innistrad. So in that, she made a few play errors that probably resulted in some suboptimal plays, which basically let me get through and generally develop a better board state, and then I ended up winning the race, even with some removal and life gain on her part. And so I won the first game. The second game was a bit more lopsided towards me. I pretty much controlled the board, and I bounced most of her creatures or forced her into bad blocks or chumping. And part of that was because even with less lands, I managed to play creature after creature after creature every turn and win that way. So that was the first match. I won it pretty handily. The second match I played against an Is It Pirate and Dinosaurs deck, and this was a lot harder. The first game of the second match I dominated just because of how aggressive I was, and everything in my deck was farming perfectly. I was bouncing his big dinosaurs, and I was, for the most part, not worrying about almost all of the creatures that he played. He had a bunch of evasive pirates, but they were evasive on the ground, so they couldn't block my flyer, so I was just going in and getting value, moving his blockers out of the way, and whenever he played a big creature, I would bounce it. So the one thing that I should have done after this game, which I won, is to remove Sea Legs from my deck, because he had a lot of pirates, and there was no need for me to have Sea Legs, because it wouldn't affect him, and I don't have enough pirates for it to be good. But I failed to do that, and so it was a dead card, remainder of the 2 games. The second game, I took a mulligan to 6, and I kept a hand with 2 lands in it, and I did not draw a land for 6 turns thereafter. Basically, by the time I could start playing cards, it almost didn't matter. He had me at such a low life total and had such a better board than me that there was pretty much nothing I can do about it. So I lost. The third game was a much more contentious game. I started off pretty aggressive, swinging in for the attacks, and my opponent was just a little bit on the slow side. Eventually was plowing down most of my creatures with his removal, and that led to a point where the tide slowly turned, especially because for the last 8 turns of my games, I drew 7 lands and 1 spell, 1 creature, and at that point, my life total was so low that there was nothing I can do about his unblockables, and his life total was significantly higher. So even if and when I were to swing, but I couldn't swing because he had a big dinosaur that I had to chump against, I ended up unable to win just because lands are useless in my deck once I get past like 4 or 5 lands. I lost, but it was close. I definitely made him work for that win. I was 1-1 going to game 3. Game 3 was against a Grixis Pirates deck, and this player, I think, had a very cavalier attitude towards playing. He played a deck that only had 11 lands, despite the fact they had 3 colors, and yeah, he kept his curve 4 and under, but I think the inefficiency of his deck kind of showed against the much more focused effort of my deck. I mean, he put up a good fight considering that he had mana troubles pretty much the entire game, but generally playing on a decent curve and being able to play my creatures on time and disrupting him once in a while with combat tricks or tempo bounce pretty much ruled the day in both of our games. The second game, I think, was even more unbalanced towards me because he only ever got 2 of his 3 colors, and that just goes to show, don't play 11 lands in sealed. Even if you're playing very aggressive, maybe 16, 15 if you're just like 1-2 drops heavy. But yeah, 11 lands, probably not a good idea. Certainly not when you're playing 3 colors in sealed. And then my final game was against an Esper Vampires. It was really black-white Orzhov Vampires with a tiny splash of blue. And I never really saw what the blue splash was for. But pretty much I was far more aggressive, and I forced bad blocks and used tempo plays to sort of remove his creatures. And even when he was able to stabilize briefly by playing the the card that creates 3 1/1 tokens and so forth, I was still able to basically fly over him with my flyers and force him to chump my ground creatures here and there thanks to the Territorial Hammer Skulls and bounce and combat tricks, and I kind of just ran away with the game. The second game was pretty much a repeat of the first. There's not much more to say. My opponent got land screwed just a little bit, that just made it even worse for him. The deck could have been even more efficient if I had more 2-drops, I think, but I think the deck still worked pretty well, and I really enjoyed this set for its tribal synergies, or just its general synergies, because I wasn't really focused too much on the tribes. The vampire thing only helped me with maybe 2 cards, which is the Sanguine Glorifier and the Forerunner of the Legion, and those 2 did actually play a pretty good role in getting damage through, because they both added to the power of the other vampires, usually the Exultant Sky Marchers, but every once in a while I'd help the Sky Marcher Aspirant, or sometimes the other creatures, because the Forerunner of the Legion doesn't really care what you put the +1/+1 temporary boost to, so you could boost any of the other creatures as long as a vampire comes into play. And so it was very aggressive. The combat tricks were actually quite good in this format overall, because removal isn't that great, and sometimes the damage-based removal can't get past a combat trick. If you put it on as Exalted Sky Marcher, it's attacking, somebody tries to do 4 damage to it to kill it, you put Vampire Zeal on it, and suddenly it nullifies the combat trick and then does an additional 2 damage. And I probably could have done even better if the deck didn't stumble on its drawing in the second match. The actual pre-release itself didn't have anything special going for it. There wasn't any specific activity or anything like that. So you really just were playing. I think this was a bit of a miss, just because with 4 different factions, pirates, dinosaurs, merfolk, and vampires, you really could have had, like, choose and align yourself with one of the factions, and then you'll get a seed pack, a booster pack that contains only cards of that faction. And I think that would have been really cool, so that you could just pick your team before you played and then just sort of swear allegiance to that team for that pre-release, and then we can see which team, pirates, dinosaurs, vampires, or merfolk, is the best of that bunch. But as it was, the set's pretty fun, so I enjoyed it just as that. This is a very last small set, so it's the last pre-release I'm going to be able to do with a small set, and I enjoyed it. For my wins, 3-1, I got 2 booster packs from Rivals of Ixalan, which I will be opening when I play a sealed deck or a draft in the future. And that was my pre-release. If you enjoyed this video, hit the like button. If you would like to see more such videos, hit subscribe. This was Rufetch. Thanks for watching, and I will see you next time.